For jumping on today. Appreciate it. Today we're going to be talking about a couple of things I think that are quite interesting. We're going to be talking about the 40-year mortgage. Now, we know it's been done before, but we've got some insight on this that I think you're going to find very interesting. So we've got a 40-year mortgage on tap. The other thing that we're going to be looking at is what we spoke about yesterday, men versus women, when it comes to participating in more than swimming events. We certainly have that. And we are also going to be talking about 100-year mortgages as well. Now, if you haven't watched the show before, or if you haven't watched my lives before, I appreciate you being here. My name is Brian Stevens. I host the National Real Estate Post. It's a video blog. You can get there by going to thenationalrealestatepost.com. It's always much more interesting when you guys are participating with me, so let me know who's on here, who's watching, where you guys are watching from, and also what you think of our topics. If you agree with me, awesome. If you disagree with me, even better. Sharing is caring, so if you share this, that helps me bring more content to you, so I appreciate that. Also want to let you know that when we're doing our non-QM deals, as I spoke about before, stick with non-QM lenders. Don't have your A-paper lenders do your non-QM deals. Why is that? Very, very simply, as I said before, and this is so true, you have to understand this, is that non-QM lenders actually traditionally underwrite your files. Okay, so it's not going through an automated system. You know, it's not LP, it's not DO, it's just no automated system. It actually has an underwriter who has a brain, who's going to look at the guidelines relative to what the file that you present. And as is the case with so much non-QM, as used to be the case with the subprime loans of years past, the underwriters with strictly non-QM companies have the ability to make exceptions to the rules, okay? Now, when you're dealing with A-paper agency lenders who are now jumping into the non-QM space, this makes sense. It's very practical. One, they don't want any buybacks. They're wildly risk-averse. They are going to run theirs automated, and if that automation doesn't come back, the underwriter is not going to have the discretion to make those exceptions to guarantee that your files are going to get done. Why is that? Is because our A-paper agency lenders, who are great at what they do, by the way, don't have a non-QM company do your A-paper stuff. But because that's been in their DNA for so long, running automated files where you just run it, you get your findings, and then your underwriter is going to check to make sure that you've calculated your income the right way, that you don't have any wild large deposits, and that the comps that are used on your appraisal are going to be the best comps available. And essentially what the underwriter is going to do is try to mitigate any type of buyback situation. So when you're dealing with your non-QM stuff, just deal with non-QM companies. It's going to be better for you. And my friends over at Oaktree, they are strictly a non-QM lender. They've been doing the DSCR program that I know everybody's heard about right now. They've been doing this longer than anybody out there. They have a family-run business out of Gilbert, Arizona. These guys are super, super cool to work with. They're always conscientious of the rates. So when you're looking at your A-paper lenders doing non-QM, I would run it against Oaktree, because that Pepsi challenge is going to come back that Oaktree is going to have better rates than your A-paper lenders, and their underwriters have the ability to create exceptions. Their DSCR program totally kicks ass, so make sure you check it out. And the other one is, of course, is they've got their bank statement loans for self-employed folks. They go 90% cash out refinances. They go as low as a 600 FICO, $4 million loan amount, the max DTI of 55 for a full doc deal. That's actually fantastic. The cool thing is you could do a 40-year mortgage on their bank statement loan. And that means you get a 10-year interest-only period up front. You're going to qualify on the interest-only period up front. So that 55 full doc DTI ratio, which is going to get you a much more competitive interest rate, is going to allow you to be fairly aggressive when it comes to qualifying those folks. So make sure you talk to Oaktree. They've got account reps right now who are there to help you out. So those guys are pretty cool. It's pretty good stuff. All right, so let's jump into what we spoke about yesterday just for a couple of minutes here. I thought this was actually kind of interesting to look at. So what I said was, men can simply afford to buy more home than single men can afford to buy more home than single women. Again, this is something that we went over, but because I'm running this through Streamlabs right now, I can actually show you some of the information. So I thought it was pretty interesting. So let's look at a couple right now. So what you're looking at right now is the 10 least affordable cities for single people to buy in. In the yellow, that would be women. In the kind of that tealish blue color, that would be men, single men. So you can see up top, number one, New York, New York. It would require 126% of a woman's income in order to buy, get this guys, an entry-level home. What is deemed to be an entry-level home, that being one bedroom, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, flats, that type of thing. So your average single woman who's living in New York, New York, would have to use 126% of her income in order to buy a house. That, of course, was back in 2017. 2021, incomes have gone up, but it's still 117%. So for the purposes of what we're talking about, we're going to use the 2021 numbers. So 117% to buy an entry-level home for a woman in New York. Can't do it. Now for a man, it's 88%. Both of these are completely and wildly unaffordable. Los Angeles, number 2, you can see that 103% to buy an entry-level house for a woman, 79% for a man. Boston, the 3rd least affordable, 98% of the income for an entry-level for a woman, 78% for a man. As we're going down here, San Francisco, number 4, 84% for a woman, 66% for a man. And we go down to San Diego, which I actually thought San Diego leapfrogged San Francisco as a less affordable city, but it would be 60% of a woman's income to buy an entry-level flat in San Diego, and 43% for a man. Meaning, this is what we've already known here for quite some time, that buying a house is just unaffordable right now. It's pretty crazy, though. And this is why our housing market is so wildly, wildly unhealthy. And by the way, I'm going to talk about that 40-year mortgage as it pertains to affordability. Because what I'm going to propose to you is that the longer that we push these mortgages out, the less affordable homes are going to become for people. Not the more. Why would somebody do a 40-year mortgage instead of a 30-year mortgage? Well, it's very simple, affordability. You take that loan and you amortize it over a 40-year period, and that 40-year period is going to give you a smaller payment than a 30-year loan. Longer, shorter payment, shorter, bigger payment. But the exact opposite is going to take place. So let's keep going with this list real quickly. Let's go right over here to this one. Okay, so the 10 most affordable cities. Now, what I find interesting about this that I tried to point out yesterday, and this is the 10 most affordable cities for single females to buy in, is when we were looking at like the affordability between a man and a woman in an expensive city, like in New York, San Francisco, Boston, like remember it was like 117% of a woman's income, 88% of a man's income. So we've got 17, 27. You have a 29% shift between a male and a female, a single male and a single female. Meaning you would assume that in the more affluent cities, the wage gap is going to be much more significant between men and women. Because when we go to the most affordable cities, we only have a 1% wage gap in the most affordable city, that being Detroit. It would require a woman to use 11% of her income to buy an entry-level house in Detroit. And it would require a man 10% of his income to buy an entry-level house in Detroit. What this doesn't take into consideration is the $450,000 Kevlar inserts into the walls to keep the bullets from shooting through your plaster of parasite and your sheetrock when the drive-bys take place in Detroit. That might make these houses less affordable. I'm just kidding. That's not funny, Brian. It's a little funny. Maybe not. Anyways, moving on. So we have Oklahoma, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Louisville, Kentucky, Raleigh, North Carolina. Raleigh that one kind of trips me out because when we're looking at the Carolinas, they tend to be the more affluent areas on the east, some of the more affluent areas down south. But if we look at that, it's 22% of a woman's income, 17% of a man. So we're still just looking at a wage gap of 5% there. And of course, we get all the way down to San Antonio. So Texas and Oklahoma are well represented in some of the most affordable cities around the country. And again, San Antonio, we're looking at a 6% wage gap between a single man and a single woman. So as I showed you, it stands to reason in the more affluent cities, there seems to be a much more significant wage gap between men and women. However, what I would propose, as I said yesterday, is, when you're finding the more affordable cities, these would be the poorest cities in our country, you're going to find more incomes where both men and women have to work in order to afford to live. Unfortunately, that's just the case. When we look at some of our more affluent cities like San Francisco, Boston, you know, Manhattan, I think what you're going to find when it comes to couples is that oftentimes you're going to find women who simply just don't have to work because there's just so much more money that's going around. Or maybe there's even, well, it's going to be women who don't have to work. And I think that that's where the difference is. And again, I'm not being sexist here, so just bear with me. If you're going to look in the more affordable cities, the poorest cities in our country, you're going to have 10 women who work, take their income divided by 10, you're going to figure out what that income per average is. You go to the more affluent cities, you're going to, let's say you have 7 women who work, so you're going to take 10 women, 7 incomes divided by 10, and it's going to pull it down because you have 3 in that sample pool who simply don't have to work and aren't working. So it's going to make that wage gap seem even more significant than it is. That's what I'm speculating. It certainly could be variables and factors that are greater than that. But suffice it to say, you know, we have wild unaffordability across the board right now. We're seeing it over here in California. We're seeing it all over the place. So that's why I found it really interesting when FHA decided that they were going to come out and do 40-year loan modifications. Did you guys hear about this? A 40-year loan modification. Okay, so let's think this thing through for a second. Okay? This is what FHA just said. I don't know if you heard it, but they've told their servicers to go out there and let's do 40-year loan modifications. All right. So a recent report published by the FHA revealed that in December 2021, 7.28% of FHA loans were seriously delinquent, down from a seasonally adjusted high of 12.04% in March 2021. However, the rate is still elevated compared with pre-pandemic times. Hey, Thomas, I was doing some math on a piece of paper at my desk over there. Can you hand it to me?
I can get it.
Oh, thanks. Well, thanks, Tito. Totally appreciate that, buddy. You want to bring that over here? Awesomeness. You are so awesome.
You're welcome.
Okay.
See you later.
All right, later, alligator. You out of here too? Are you pitching today? Okay. All right, so I want you guys to look at this here, okay? 7.28% of FHA loans were seriously delinquent. That's going to be 90-plus days delinquent on their mortgage. Assuming you've gone through your forbearance period, you've come out of your forbearance period, you're still not making your payment. So FHA says, I know, let's put everybody into a 40-year loan. They're not paying a 30-year loan. People aren't going to pay a 40-year loan. They're just not going to do it. I say foreclose on all of them. I just seriously, it is. You signed a promissory note. There are more available jobs in this country than there've ever been. I want you to consider this. We have an inventory problem. We also have a tax-based problem. So we have people who are not paying their taxes, paying their property taxes, which is a detriment to our individual communities that we live in. As of 2019, we had a population of 329,500,000 folks. 2019, 329.5. 62%, no, excuse me. The average household size in 2019 was 2.52 people. Okay? So if we take the 329,500,000 divided by your average family size in this country of 2.52, that means we have 130,753,968 households in the country. Take the population, average household size, and it comes out to 130,753,000. Okay. Of those 130 million, 62% are homeowners. That means of the 130 million, we have of family sizes that average 2.52 people. That means we have 81,067,460 owner-occupied properties in the country. Of those 81 million, 7.79% are FHA loans. Okay? No, excuse me. Of those 81 million, 9.61% are FHA loans. That means we have approximately 7,790,582 FHA loans in this country with an average family size of 2.52%. Of those 7,790,000, we now know that 7.28% of them are delinquent, or 567,154 people. So according to what we know right now, based on the best available statistics, there are 567,154 FHA deals, households who aren't making their payments, but more importantly, by extension, are not paying their taxes. So they're not paying into the collective kibbutz of the town that you guys live in. That's not good for anybody. And by turning those houses into 40-year loans, it ain't gonna get anybody. It ain't gonna get anybody to make their payments. If you're not paying on a 30, knocking $140 off that mortgage is not going to get people off the fence and making their house payments, especially if they're 90 plus days late. This is one of the problems that you run into when you don't underwrite the forbearances that everybody went into. Because, like it or not, there are just people in this country who don't want to make payments. Now, I know there are people who can't make their payments. There are people who got injured. There are people who their unemployment ran out. There are people who simply can't find a job for a variety of reasons that make no sense to me whatsoever. But there are those people out there. I get it. But you see, what we have to do on a federal level, on a national level, is we have to have something that kind of resembles a one-size-fits-all solution to the problems that we are facing, that we're staring down right now. Because trust me, these problems are going to get a hell of a lot harder before they get better, and we need to start to have practical, pragmatic solutions to some of the problems. So with FHA right now, we got 567,154 people who aren't making their payment, who are 90 plus days late. And HUD seems to think that extending their not paying their mortgage payment history for another 6 months by putting them into a 40-year loan modification is going to be helpful. And frankly, it's not. And what we learned yesterday is there's also homeowner assistance for folks who aren't making their payment to make their payments for them. And we already had the FHFA, who controls Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac in all of their portfolio loans, which is even bigger than HUD's and FHA's over here, who said we're going to extend your foreclosure forbearance if you apply for more free money. We learned that yesterday. Now what we're learning from HUD, that was Fannie and Freddie yesterday. Now what we're learning from Jenny is they have a very similar cockamamie, ain't gonna work solution to the foreclosure problem that is going to get bigger before it gets worse. Now, keep in mind, these folks should not get foreclosed on. There's way too much equity. They've been sitting in the house not making their payment for 2 years, and their property values have appreciated by 24 to 36%. They made a couple $100,000 on average per household over the last 27 months by not making their payment. So they ain't getting foreclosed on. What they're going to do is sell these houses and realize a whole bunch of money that they simply wouldn't have had if they would have been foreclosed on a couple of years ago. So a 40-year amortized modification is the solution for these 567,000 people. All right. Is that a good idea or a bad idea? I would love to know what you guys think. Is it a good idea or a bad idea? I think it's a bad idea. Here's the reason why it's a bad idea. First of all, let's say you're 35 years old. Actually, let's just talk about 40-year mortgages in general. All right, you're 35 years old. You get the house of your dreams. You get a 40-year mortgage. That means I pay that house off when I'm 75 years old. Now, the thinking is you want your house paid off when you retire. That's the thinking. Not always going to work, but that's the goal, right? Because your earning ability and with your age is a bell curve. You start earning in your late teens, early 20s. By you hit your 30s and 40s, you're starting to hit the top of the bell curve. And your 50s and 60s, your earning capabilities go back down. Woo, it's a bell curve, okay? So when you retire, you make less money, you get your pension, you get your retirement, you get your Social Security, but it works because you own your house free and clear because you got a 30-year mortgage when you're 30 years old, you're 65 when you retire, you're 65 when the house is paid off. Jed's a millionaire, everybody's happy. That's the thinking. When you're 35 years old and you find that house of your dream and you get a 40-year mortgage, now you're 75 years old when that thing is paid off. You have long since been retired, your income has reduced, and can you actually afford to live in the house that you purchased 40 years prior or 30 years prior? And the answer is probably not. The solution right now would be a reverse mortgage. But what we've seen with reverse mortgages, haven't we, is that they're extending the age on reverse mortgages out longer, and they're doing this because people are living longer. If people would just die younger, we could have had the old underwriting guidelines for reverse mortgages. Now, of course, I'm being a little crass about this whole thing, but frankly, that's the truth. People are living longer. And 10 years ago, under the old underwriting guidelines for HECMs, for reverse mortgages, the Mutual Mortgage Insurance Fund of FHA was suffering when we were speaking specifically about reverse mortgages, because they were paying out way too many claims because people were living way too long. So HUD came out and said, okay, we're going to extend this, kind of like with Social Security. All right, now we're going to by the time I get my Social Security, it's like, okay, you can start collecting your Social Security when you're 87. You watch, it's going to happen. Same thing with reverse mortgages. But I mean, that's a solution. But the idea is you could pay your house off. But let me ask you this. If we're going to have a conversation about a 40-year mortgage, why don't we just have a conversation about a 100-year mortgage? Really? Well, you're not being serious now, Brian. I'm being dead serious. Why not just have a conversation about a 100-year mortgage? If the idea is we're not concerned about paying the house off because that's what a 40-year mortgage is screaming at me, we're not concerned about paying that house off, and all we're concerned about is what our monthly outgoing is, well, if a 40 is better than a 30, then 100 is better than a 40. You're not being serious, Brian. You're not being serious. But what if I am? What if I am? Oh. All right. The reason I bring it up is a 100-year mortgage has already been done. It's been around for a decade. Over a decade. Seriously. A 100-year mortgage has already been done. It's been around so long that we have actually had a chance to analyze the 100-year mortgage to see if it helps affordability. And here's an abstract from said study on said 100-year mortgage. By the way, it was in Japan. Japan, remember when Tokyo was like super expensive? They started offering 100-year mortgages because nobody could afford to live there. And this is the road we're on over here with some of our bigger cities. I just showed you 117% of your income to buy an entry-level home in New York. And it's getting worse. All right. So here's what we learned about a 100-year mortgage in Japan. A recent innovation in the Japanese real estate industry to promote home ownership is the creation of the 100-year mortgage term. The home encumbered by the mortgage becomes an ancestral property and is passed on from grandparent to grandchild in a multi-generational fashion. We analyze the implication of this innovation practice, contrast it with the conventional 30-year fixed-rate mortgage popular in Western nations, and explore its unique benefits and limitations within the Japanese economic and cultural framework. Through the use of simulation, the conclusion is reached that the 100-year mortgage has failed to increase affordability in homes. Period. A 100-year mortgage has, the conclusion is the 100-year mortgage has failed to increase affordability in homes. Instead, affluent homeowners are more likely to employ longer-term mortgages as an estate planning tool to reduce inheritance taxes. Well, ain't that something? We have a new financial instrument at our disposal, and what happens? Rich people find a way to game it. Poor people find a way to get hurt by it. Well, hold on a second here, Brian. What you're telling me is that if I can amortize something over 100 years, I could take a $5,000 monthly payment, I can turn it into a $1,200 monthly payment. That is clearly cheaper, that is clearly more affordable, that is probably cheaper than renting the rental alternative. So I find the abstract from this study on a 100-year mortgage versus a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage to be in error with the decisions or the conclusions that they drew. All right. Let's think this through for a minute. Okay. Now, what have we done with the United States housing market right now? And first of all, we ain't getting the type of inventory that we need. Period. In 2018, we had a 2.5 million unit shortage in housing that was required for a healthy housing market in the United States. 2.5 million properties. Now, the thinking is we're going to roll our sleeves up and fix this crap, right? In 2021, it was 3.8 million. In short, from 2018 to current day, our housing shortage has gotten almost twice as bad as the already atrocious numbers that we saw back in 2018. It's getting worse, not getting better. And the forecast for the future, when we start looking at housing starts, it's going to get even worse. Meaning there's going to be fantastical bidding wars on the limited inventory that we currently have. So what have we done up until this point? Well, with our artificially low rates, courtesy of the Federal Reserve, buying mortgage-backed securities and adding them to their bottom line over there, with our 2.5% and our 3.25%, 3.5% interest rates, we have bid houses up all across the country to a point where nobody can afford anything. I just showed you what a single professional woman would have to make to buy a house in 10 cities across the country. The most affordable houses in those 10 cities, not just any house. We're not talking about mansions. No, we're talking about flats. We're talking about one bedrooms. 117% of your income. This is unsustainable, and it's getting worse. So when rates go up by 0.5%, we lose 5% purchasing power. So when we went we were at 2.5%, we're now at 5%, okay? So what have we lost? 5%, 10%, 15%, 20%, 25%. Over the past year, we've lost 25% of our collective purchasing power. As interest rates go up, affordability becomes much more difficult for us, right? Well, if we can't buy the houses at their current price and somebody wants to sell their house, they're going to have to bring those prices down to meet us. Okay, if rates are going up, people can't afford to buy our house because we don't have 2.5% rates anymore, so property values start to trickle back down a little bit. That makes sense. This is the equilibrium ebb and flow of any type of market, supply and demand, right? Well, if we have a 40-year mortgage, all we're doing is making properties more affordable for us. The only thing that's going to do with our housing shortage is it's going to put people in positions to bid the prices of houses even higher than what they currently are. If you gave somebody a 40-year mortgage option with a 2.5% interest rate like we had last year, the median sales price for a house in this country right now, which is about $360,000, would be about $420,000. That's what would happen. We would bid it up to the absolute maximum of our collective ability to buy. If you gave somebody a 2.5% interest rate and a 100-year mortgage, what would we do? With our massive demand and our limited supply, we would bid the median house across the country up to about $600,000. That's what we would do, because we are no longer concerned about paying off this property, are we? No, we are only concerned about what that monthly payment is. And this is precisely the reason why a 100-year mortgage didn't work over in Japan. Rich people are saying, well, I can just transfer this house and avoid taxes. Well, shit, I'm going to get this thing. I don't care if I have a 30-year, 40-year, 50-year, or 100-year mortgage, but a 100-year mortgage is going to allow me to transfer this to my kids and allow my kids to transfer it to their kids. We're going to avoid all types of taxes. This is going to be great. In the meantime, property values get bid through the roof, and those on the lowest socioeconomic rungs in our cities and our societies are the ones who are going to suffer the ill consequence of. Because now that house is going to cost you twice as much as it had just a few short years earlier. It is human nature, it is our nature to go ahead, especially with real estate right now, to bid up to the maximum capacity of our ability to make that monthly payment, and that is the only determining factor. That's it. So, do we really want to put people in hawk for 40 years, for 50 years, for 60 years, beyond their retirement dates? Do we really want to do that? Is that where we need to be? And trust me, there is a part of me that says maybe that is the case right now. Maybe that's what we need to do. Maybe that is the most reasonable solution on the table amongst the options of the unattractive options that we have. There's no terribly attractive options on the table, short of, as I've said before, the Army Corps of Engineers coming in here, us declaring housing a state of emergency in the United States, and the Army Corps of Engineers going out there and building millions and millions of entry-level homes for everybody. That would be a great solution, but since that one's not being tabled right now, I don't know. So in any event, yes, what we're doing is we're staring down 40-year options for people who aren't making their payment right now as a solution for your Jenny loans. For your Fannie Freddie loans right now, we have the FHFA saying we're going to continue extending out your forbearance or your let's not send the sheriff to your house and kick you and your lazy boy and 72-inch TV out on the curb solution for folks not making their payment for another 2, 4, 5, 6 months if you apply for even more free money. And in the meantime, the Fed is going to keep raising interest rates because all of these solutions that are being considered right now are all solutions that are not terribly friendly to the whole idea of reducing inflation. All of these options are extending our leverage points and adding more money into the economy, which is diluting everything that we have right now. So, as I said before, we are sending mixed messages with where we're at right now. We are doing things at one level to ensure that inflation is going to keep going up, and then we have the Fed who's trying to make inflation go down. And here's, as I said before, guys, watch the next 6 months. November 8th is when we're going to have our midterms. We are going to find all of our elected officials right now are going to start to look at a lot of these entitlement programs, and they're going to be pushing entitlement programs, free money programs out there, because they have understood this to be the best way to get reelected. So with a few short 6 months away from the next election cycle, watch the bully pulpiting, watch the sandbox approach, watch the soapbox approach to some of the problems that we have, especially when it comes to housing. And I find this very interesting, is there was a lot of talk about housing and solutions to housing during the last election cycle. And what we have all collectively discovered is this current administration has done very little, had very little hands-on solutions to some of the problems that face housing right now. And this has come from people that have been very bipartisan. So it's going to be interesting to see the next 6 months if a lot of folks are going to be dusting off the hot button issues of housing and using these as topics to get reelected. And if they do, I hope our industry says, that's great that you're talking about it now, but why just now? Why have you been ignoring this for the past 2 years? And why are we coming up with solutions that make no sense? So anyways, this is what I had to share with you guys today. I hope you found it interesting. I hope you found it helpful. Again, sharing is caring. Hit that share button. Leave me a comment. Leave me a message. Let me know what you guys want to talk about. It just makes these way more interesting and entertaining for me from a selfish standpoint. I love the interaction. And with that said, I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Oh, by the way, I get to pick up my daughter. She's coming up from San Diego. Haven't seen her in the last 6 months, so pretty stoked about that. Pretty stoked about tomorrow. You guys make it a great day. Hope you guys had a great Wednesday, and I'll see you tomorrow on Thursday. Ciao, Maine, folks.